Okay, so let's get started with today's webinar, Storytelling and Learning, a Tale as Old as Time. I'm going to start with a few housekeeping rules, tips, guidance. Rules always feels too strict for me. All of you are in listen-only mode, but you can communicate with me at any point during the webinar using that question panel you just used. You will receive a recording of this webinar within the next 24 hours. And there will be a survey at the end, and I really would love to know your thoughts and feedback, so please do fill this in. So I'm Hannah Wadham, the Marketing Manager here at Cursim, Omniplex's Learning Design Agency. And also on the line with me today is my colleague Charlotte, who's an e-learning solutions consultant. Our job today is to help you learn all about storytelling in learning and help guide you through how to implement this into your digital learning strategy. Charlotte will be keeping an eye on the questions panel. So if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, pop them in there. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session. So what are we going to cover today? Well, first we're going to speak about why storytelling is an effective teaching technique. We're then going to discuss how to incorporate storytelling into your e-learning modules. And then we're going to look at some inspiration for your next e-learning development project to see how we can incorporate storytelling into some of the most typical e-learning topics. So, just before we get started, I want to ask you all a question. Let me just pull up my poll. I've just noticed a typo in my poll, so please excuse that. I would like to know, would you use a film plot as a storyline for your next e-learning course? All the responses are coming in thick and fast. Oh, we've had a few maybes in the question panel as well. I tried to make it as hard as possible by only giving you the yes and no options. Susan said probably not. Oh, that's so interesting. So I'm just going to close the poll. 58% of you have said you wouldn't use a film plot as a storyline for your next e-learning course. So let's see if I can change that perspective in the next 30 minutes. So why is storytelling such an effective teaching technique? Well, storytelling is an age-old teaching technique. We start teaching our children through stories from the moment they begin to react to the world around them. Stories make us care, they improve our understanding, and they really bring learning to life. And I witnessed a really great example of the joy storytelling brings to learning just this weekend. My 5-year-old niece literally jumped up with excitement, wanting to complete her homeschooling work on a Saturday because her mum had just told her it included watching an episode of Number Blocks on the BBC iPlayer. So Number Blocks tells children a story about a group of friends who can always count on each other in order to teach maths. Wouldn't it be really great if our learners felt this excited about corporate learning? Well, I truly believe they can. Storytelling in corporate learning is proven to increase cohesiveness in teams and improve corporate culture. It takes your learners beyond and away from the we have to learn this and transforms your content into something they want to learn. And what's more, a good story will always be retold. A really great marketer, Seth Godin, coined the term idea virus, which made me giggle and I thought was very topical right now, even though he actually wrote the book back in 2009. But an idea virus is an idea or a story that infects and changes every single individual it touches, even if that change is just a really small one. But due to that change, the first person to catch the idea virus will spread it. They'll tell their friends and their family and their peers, and the story will catch on. But not any story will do. Half-hearted stories will not grab your learner's attention. And they will definitely not transform your content, your e-learning content, into an idea virus. The story in your digital learning has to be great. So let me know in the chat panel, what do you think makes a great story? So we've had Kathy that said compelling characters. Gavin also said compelling characters. Oh God, these are coming in so quickly. Escapism, baddies and goodies, suspense, tension, overcoming challenges, a solid plot, something you can relate to, personally relate to, Rebecca has said, suspense, humanity, having feelings behind it, relatable, a logical structure, humor's definitely a good one, Gavin. Susan has said pictures, and that's very interesting. We'll come back onto that. Right, I think there's some really great ideas there. Oh. In my opinion, great stories are true and trusted. They make a promise and they happen fast. They appeal to the learner's senses, not their logic, and agree with the worldview of the learner. And they rarely target the mass market. So how can we incorporate this into digital learning? Well, there's two things we must understand to start. Corporate learning must be related to the goals of the class. There is absolutely no point in telling learners a story about riding a bike to teach them about anti-bribery and corruption. Though I'm sure if anyone can make a link between these two, it'll be somebody on this webinar. Secondly, the protagonist of your story, the main character of your story, must be faced with a choice where all options are practical and have pros and cons. This will keep your learner engaged. If they can keep guessing the outcome, by the second time they've guessed it, you would have lost their attention. So what does this mean in reality? There are three key ways we can incorporate storytelling into our digital learning. And this is by using illustrations, videos, and we can really take it one step further and use branched scenarios. So first, let's talk about illustrations. There's a reason children's books are so full of illustrations. And no, it's not to fill the pages because their stories are usually shorter. They'd just make a smaller book if that was the case. Illustrations help the reader or the learner understand the context of the story. You've all heard the saying, a picture speaks 1,000 words. But when it comes to any form of communications, pictures truly are the most universally understood language. And that was said by Walt Disney himself. Let's take the story of the BFG, for example. I hope you will remember it from your childhoods. If you had to rely on reading to understand that his ears were as big as his head, or that Sophie was small enough to fit in the palm of his hand, you might have overlooked the fact that the BFG captured dreams and kept them in bottles. So when this is used so much through early learning, why would we overlook it in corporate learning? There are a few key elements to storytelling aside from the typical introduction, middle, and end. And these include setting the scene, presenting a conflict or a choice, portraying a specific point of view, tone, or style. And a lot of those you guys come up with yourself in the questions panel. So rather than using valuable time and effort describing the bustling sound of your office or the messy factory in words, show your learners. Set the scene with an illustration or an image. Instead of describing how a manager might feel conflicted and worried when dismissing an employee, show them that emotion. By setting the scene and portraying a point of view or a tone through an illustration or imagery, you're reducing the cognitive load on your learners, and you're freeing up that space in their brain for them to focus on the all-important learning content. But how would this apply in the real world? Well, one of my good friends works in a leading chain of opticians, but it surprised many people to know that not all people that work in opticians are qualified optometrists. So it's my friend's job to make sure that all the staff working in there have a thorough understanding of the ins and outs of an eye test and use the right terminology. So my friend takes them through an image similar to the one in the background here. It helps the learners learn and understand the ins and outs of an eye test very quickly and easily. It will take substantially less cognitive load to process this image than it would if I try to explain this in words. I don't know how I would even go about explaining how the letters on the wall inside an optometrist hit the back of your eye for you to translate them. It would take a long time, especially having to use the correct terminology. So our next medium of storytelling, video. Now, if video wasn't an efficient and effective method of conveying messaging, then no book would have ever been turned into a movie. And as a huge Potter fan, I couldn't discuss this subject without mentioning the Harry Potter series. It's now worth over $25 billion, and it's one of the most successful book come film franchises ever. If you ask a die-hard Harry Potter fan, they'll say the books are better because you can read and imagine all the fine detail of this magical world. But if you ask people that have only seen the film, they'll speak about this magical world with just as much delight and enthusiasm. The film truly portrays a story, but with less cognitive load for the reader, watcher, or in our case, learner. Video allows us as learning designers to convey a lot of information in a short amount of time, to depict emotion, behaviour, and culture more easily, and simplify the complicated. And that last one is probably most important for us. So how can video be used in e-learning? Can movie-like concepts really be used in corporate digital e-learning? Well, yes, they can. Videos convey the number one feature of great stories, authenticity. Elaborate, unbelievable stories just won't cut it with our learners. So let's conduct an experiment. There are two homeless people on the street, each with a sign that tells a story. Which of these stories in the image of your screen is most likely to make you dig into your pocket and hand over your last pound coin? Let me know in the questions panel. Okay, we've actually got quite a mixed bag here. Oh, somebody's just corrected themselves. Based on your answer, tell me why. Why would you choose the one you've just chosen? Somebody said it's more believable. Seems real. I feel like the comment of they were horrible little brats might have come from a parent. Josh is still torn. Okay. Well, surprisingly for some, the research behind this actually shows that the first one is more likely to make somebody hand over money. The story, the second one, that is attempting to evoke emotion and compassion isn't that believable, and in turn isn't that effective, because really you're not going to be sat there 10 years on, are you? This was actually an experiment run by a guy called Shane Snow, and I'll make sure I share the TED Talk with you all in the follow-up email of today's webinar. His experiment had a very similar turnout to ours, so it proves we're not a bunch of cynics, that the first image is the most compelling. So to work, we now know to work our story has to be believable, or at least echo the truth in some way. This is an example, I'm about to show you an example from our friends at Beyond that does a great job of using storytelling to aid learning.
Good evening, Agent. Your mission is to take down the evil Dr. Ogma. Here's the rundown on tonight's cyber attack at Ogma HQ. It's simple. Gain access, spread the computer virus, destroy the data. Your destination is the application room located at the core of the building. There is only one way in. First, climb through the Wi-Fi tunnel to the entry portal. Hide yourself in the incoming mail. There may be security guards on duty, but they seldom check. Once you're in the storeroom, wait until the right moment to attack. Your friendly disguise should protect you from being noticed. And the antivirus system is out of date, so you should slip past easily. Next, find the application center and do your work quickly. Install the virus. You may find the computer password protected, but you can usually see the password written down nearby or make an easy guess. Once installed, the virus will spread immediately. Get out before anyone notices. Good luck. I look forward to your update.
So I hope you agree that that was a really, really great example of making learning fun. The tension music at the beginning, the sound effects throughout, it grabs your attention and it really masks what could be quite a boring e-learning course about password compliance into a story about a spy game. So imagine taking this up one level and integrating video into a branch scenario. Branch scenarios have been a part of the Learning Designers Toolkit for a long time. And in 2018, the concept hit the mainstream media in the form of Black Mirror Bandersnatch on Netflix. In Bandersnatch, viewers make the decision for the main character, who's a young programmer, adapting a game book into a video game back in 1984. I have to say, I am the world's worst and the most guilty of just watching Netflix while scrolling through Twitter and Instagram and not really watching what's on the screen. But with Bandersnatch, I not only watched it, I was actively engaged with it. I had a real adrenaline rush while watching the film. I was in control, and my decisions were influencing the end of the story. So, how can we mimic this immersive storytelling in learning? As digital learning designers, we are the owners and founding fathers of effective branch scenarios. And branch scenarios are one of the most effective ways of telling a story in learning. As I mentioned earlier, there are a few key elements in storytelling which echo the 3 C's of branch scenarios perfectly. And for those of you that don't know, the 3 C's of branch scenarios are choice, challenge, and consequence. As I also mentioned earlier, great stories have to be feasible and realistic, and they have to pose a challenge which has a pros and cons to the learner or the viewer if we're looking at a film. This is even more important in branch scenarios, and I just want to show you an example now of a really great e-learning course. This is a course we have created for a company called MTC. They are in the prison services and work alongside offender managers who are put in quite a tough position throughout their day-to-day role and their life because they're having to deal with very vulnerable people and they often find themselves in quite difficult situations. This course tells a story. It immediately does that thing that we said was most important of setting the scene. It shows that you're in their office. It shows that you as the protagonist are at your desk, you're getting on with your work. And it really describes the surroundings to the learner without increasing the cognitive load. So the learner has to go through the course, understand their service user, gives them a lot of thorough information here, and then they meet the service user. They are presented with a choice after meeting the service user. And you can see here we've not used video, we've used hand-drawn illustrations. And yes, we are lucky enough at Cursim to have an illustrator in our team. But this is a really effective way of really bringing learning to life and telling a story without overloading the cognitive load of your learners. We don't want to kill them with words. We don't want to explain too much that will take away from the essence of the learning at hand. We want to make sure they are free to understand, learn, and retain the information that we need them to. And you'll see here, the service user is really struggling. And as the offender manager, you're set with a choice. This is a great example of really, really effective learning. So we now know about using branch scenarios as a storytelling technique. Let's consider the do's and don'ts of storytelling in digital learning. I've just spotted Nadia's comment. Yes, Nadia, I agree. I think our illustrator did a fantastic job on that course. So here are my 3 do's of storytelling in digital learning. Do set the scene. You can transport your learner to any location, time, or situation with minimal cognitive load in digital storytelling. So set the mood of the course. Make sure your learner is focused in the right way up front. With that example I just showed you, even just seeing the outside of the building, it's not some slick, high-end flash office. It's a genuine depiction of the kind of place that service users and offender managers would go to and would experience. It puts the learner in the right frame of mind. Do use heroes and villains. I love the terminology earlier of goodies and baddies. I'm not saying over-exaggerate your content to the point that it's no longer believable. That will go against our experiment earlier. Remember, these stories still need to be feasible and realistic. But do make wrong or right doings really clear to your learners. And the third step is to always consider opportunities for interactivity. I gave you 3 examples there of using illustration, video, and branch scenarios. Just because you haven't chosen to create a complete branch scenario, it doesn't mean you shouldn't break up your storytelling with some engagement of some sort. This could be quick-fire questions to check your learners are engaged, or perhaps a drag and drop scenario. Interaction is key in storytelling. You want your learners to be part of the story. So that's my do's. This is my don'ts. Don't confuse the learner. Make sure the learner doesn't lose a point in the story. If you're creating a course about office health and safety, but you spend half of the course speaking about the type of coffee that's drunk in the office, the learner's probably going to miss the point and retain the irrelevant information about the coffee. Don't baffle your learners. Don't make them spend so long thinking about and trying to decipher the storyline that it eradicates the effectiveness of the story altogether. Stories in learning should be designed to aid the learner, not to confuse them. And finally, don't overdo it. Echoing the last 2 points, don't overdo your metaphor or your story, even your illustration or your video, to the point that it completely affects the clarity of your message. So now we know why, and we've got the do's and don'ts. Let's look at some inspiration for your next digital learning course. What if we based our e-learning courses on movies? It's my favourite way of getting inspiration. So how about The Devil Wears Prada for corporate induction training? Or Monsters Inc. for health and safety training? They do take their health and safety very seriously. If you don't remember the 2319 scene, you obviously haven't watched the film as much as I have. How about Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol for cybersecurity training? Or you could even consider a comedy, like How to Lose Friends and Alienate People for management skills training. Do you guys have any suggestions of films that really jump out to you as a film that would really be a great plot for an e-learning course? Give it a few Think about it for a few seconds and let me know in the questions panel. But I'll start by telling you one that I thought of after putting my PowerPoint together. My favourite film is The Girl on the Train. And if I'm honest, it's actually my favourite book, but the film adaptation isn't too bad either. And heads up, spoiler alert, if you are planning to read the book or watch the film. The protagonist of this story witnessed something on her commute to work, and she had a choice whether to say something or not. She chose to say something, but then she was made out to be a liar. But in the end, the truth prevailed. This gives a learning designer the choice, the challenge, and the consequence of a branch scenario on a plate. So wouldn't this be a great synopsis for an ethical behaviour course, for example? So we've had a few suggestions coming. So we've got one suggestion from Alex of Toy Story 1 as conflict management from when Buzz and Woody fall out at the beginning. I love that one. Amelia has said the Expendables for health and safety, what not to do. Vincent, that's a brilliant one. Wolf of Wall Street for conduct and ethics. Andrea said identity theft, GDPR and data protection. Susan has suggested 1,000 words as a way of teaching employee relations. The plot of this story makes you think about what you haven't said and when you have said too much. I have to admit, Susan, I haven't seen that film, but I'll add it to the list. It sounds like it definitely would be a great plot to an e-learning course. Gavin has said Star Wars: A New Hope for conflict of interest. See, guys, it's really not that difficult, is it? To 9 till 5 induction from Susan. It's not hard to get inspiration from the world around us, but the purpose here isn't to completely rip off the film. I'm not saying take a film and recreate it in storyline. You may as well just get your learners to watch a film at that point. Your learner should almost not even realise where you've got the inspiration from, but you can pick out that plot, you can pick out the characters, you can pick out the scenes and the scenarios and the way that the director of the film has made us feel in a certain moment. And if you watch it with your learning designer hat on and you really look at it, you'll pick out on the things that they did that perhaps as a viewer you didn't see. The music they used in the background, the scene that they were setting. I think if there are any other English Lit A-level students on the line, you'll all know about the term of pathetic fallacy. So it's normally when in a film or in a book, something bad's going to happen. There's obviously thunder, lightning, rain, and it's a miserable day. If something good's going to happen, it's beautiful sunshine and the birds are singing. It's that kind of thing that works in our learning that you can pick up from these storylines of these films and drop into your e-learning course to make it something your learners really want to take. But above that, if they want to take it and they've enjoyed taking it, guess what? They're more likely to retain it. So that does bring me to the end of today's webinar. I have rattled on for half an hour, but I've hoped you've enjoyed it. So just recapping what we've learned today, we've learned why storytelling is effective. Simply put, we're programmed to learn. It's why we listen to stories, rather. It's why we gossip, it's why we watch TV, it's why we read books. It's just in our human nature. We know how to integrate it into our e-learning, and we know the do's and don'ts of storytelling and learning. And I hope we've given you some inspiration for your upcoming courses. I do have a few minutes left. I'm willing to stick around on the line for a bit longer. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat panel now. But if you'd like to contact myself or anybody else here at Omniplex Group, please feel free to call us or drop us an email on the details on the screen. You can always also catch me on LinkedIn by searching Hannah Wadhams. I'm always up for discussing anything to do with digital learning, creativity, or help you brainstorm new ideas. I love talking to the customers, so please feel free to add me.